Hello and welcome to today's webinar on tracking the actors behind the threats with activity clustering. This event is brought to you in partnership with AlertLogic. Thank you so much for joining us on this ActualTech Media webinar. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about today's event. My name is Davies of ActualTech Media, and I'll be serving as the host and moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational, and we encourage your questions here on today's live webinar. Experts from AlertLogic will be standing by to take those questions electronically. And we even have our best question prize, which I'll talk about here more in just a moment. You can ask your questions there in the questions pane of the audience console. And I also encourage you to check out the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a PDF resource on the AlertLogic MDR solution. So make sure that you check that out and download it before the event wraps up. At the end of the webinar today, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have our $50 Amazon gift card for the best question on today's event. That means that you have to ask a question to be entered and, of course, meet the ActualTech Media prize terms and conditions. All right, and without further delay, I'm excited now to introduce today's expert presenters. Welcome to Josh Davies, Senior Technical Marketing Manager at AlertLogic, and he'll be joined by Gareth Prothero, who is in Security Operations, also from AlertLogic. Josh and Gareth, it's great to have you on. I'll hand it off to you first. Josh, take it away.
Good day to everybody. Actually going to be looking today at, or in this session rather, at activity clustering, and which really means how we track the actors behind the threats that they use against our customer base. So joining me today is Gareth Prothero. Though I'm currently working in technical marketing now, my background is as a SOC analyst, and I used to work closely with Gareth during threat hunts. And so it's really great to have this opportunity now to bring to light some of the work and that him and many other teams within the SOC and threat intelligence do around this really complex activity clustering and the kind of benefits that give our customers. So, Gareth, if you'd like to introduce yourself and share with them all the credentials and authority that you bring to this talk.
Wow, you made me sound serious now. Yeah, my name is Gareth. I'm a senior security analyst with AlertLogic. Been in the company now for 6 years. And yeah, as Josh said, Josh and I used to work close together there in the SOC. And yeah, I spend most of my days clustering up the actors that try to compromise our customers. So, as we get into it, we're going to first look at the threats and versus threat actors. What's the difference? Why are we going to the effort at classifying and documenting the actors behind the threats? And that is the activity clustering. We'll then look at the methods of analysis. So how do we perform and create these activity clusters? And before finally summarizing the insights and outcomes, which I'm sure will be peppered amongst this talk as we go along as well. So to begin, I want to set the scene a little bit by using this metaphor of the warrior and the weapon for the threat actor versus threat. So threat being an exploit or being a kind of ransomware threat or data exfiltration, whatever that might be, is the threat. And then the threat actor being the person behind that weapon. So the sword is the threat, or the weapon is the threat, and the warrior then is the threat actor. And we can see the difference between the two in this as this metaphor continues here. So first of all, looking at tracking the threat, here we have a number of different weapons, and you can see they're all drastically different, taken from pop culture. An offensive weapon like this, it's always a good idea to investigate so you can detect upon these threats. And this is where any security organization starts out, whether you're doing a DIY setup at home, at home in your organization, or whether you are actually a managed detection or kind of security services provider. Tracking the threat is key. And is because it's high fidelity, meaning whenever an offensive weapon is observed, it's worthwhile investigating. There's normally no good reason to pull out a sword in your daily operations. But occasionally you might catch some false positives, or as Gareth would point out, the more accurate way of describing them is benign true positives, because you're still catching the weapon, which you're meant to catch. But whether it's being used for malicious purposes or not is kind of beside the point. But ultimately, that means maybe somebody pulls out the axe that we have up on screen. Are they going to use it to chop someone's head off, or are they going to use it to chop some wood? That's something that we need to investigate as analysts. So great starting point. There are some outliers to the difficulties really of detecting the threat or detecting the threat, and that's evasion in 0 days. And so this is where attackers are constantly looking for
either new, novel ways, weapons that have never been seen before. So when it comes to creating detection content, we don't know yet. We don't know what that looks like, so we can't, although we have had some great success in anticipating likely weapons from previous campaigns. And also evasions. How can they evade detection and evade prevention by maybe adding some modifications to the weapon or tweaking how it looks superficially, but it performs the same type of action? And carrying on then from looking beyond the weapon, beyond the threat, look at the actor behind there, you can see we've got a number of different threat actors or warriors up on the screen there that are drastically different. And if we continue the metaphor, some of the things that we might want to look for to understand the enemy, know thy enemy, is where do they come from? So how did they get here? And we will pair this up to the cybersecurity equivalence in a moment, so just bear with me slightly. But where do they come from? How do they get here? Is it via a horse that they rode in on? Is it from a certain direction, north, east, or south? Did they use a speedster if it's indeed that Jedi in a kind of more futuristic setting? Do they bear any insignias or certain trademarks? Maybe they have a crest or a banner that they are waving above themselves, or maybe think of like Zorro using that leaving that Z behind him every time. This is very similar to how cyber criminals and threat actors act as well, often wanting to leave something behind, a trace of the work that they've done. Which weapons do they favor, and what sequence of them do they use? So if we look at the ninja there, they've got a sword, very similar sword to the knight potentially, but they might also like to use things like a shuriken, that throw-in star. And so this can start to tell us where to look next, what to expect, and also understand the profile of these people, of these groups of people as well. Finally, we have the favored objective. So what is it they're trying to achieve? In this metaphor, it could be that the knight is turning up to slay a dragon and then use that ultra and steal the princess or prince. Or indeed, maybe they're there to enslave the population or just terminate everybody, more sinister objective. Knowing what they're intending to do helps us understand how they need to get there and the steps they're likely to take in the meantime to end up at that objective. So, some of you may have noticed quite clearly what I was getting at there when we're just looking at the cybersecurity world. But where they come from is really attacker infrastructure. Do they use any IP address that we're familiar with? Are they under a general ASO, which is automated service organization? Or they come from clouds? All this can help us understand how sophisticated they are and start to map who they are likely to be. The unique indicators, I mentioned they like to leave something behind sometimes. Large ransomware gangs like Conti or Revil back in the day, who are now potentially seeing a resurgence, they will often use that notoriety. They want you to know who it is that's behind the compromise, or maybe less intentional. We've seen Gareth has caught some great examples of where people have just misspelled pieces in a script, maybe because English is their second language, or maybe it's just a quick typo. You think of this like handwriting forensics in a police force, understanding that by how they misspell things, we can start to track who they might be, because normally people spell things right, and if they're consistent with those misspellings, we start to identify who they are or who they could likely to be within that. The TTPs, so this is the attacks, the exploits they like to use in the order that they like to use them. And finally, the objectives. So are they going for ransomware, or are they looking to be more destructive and wipe the systems completely? Is it maybe an espionage, a quieter objective? This is really important for us to understand all the steps they need to get there to that objective. And really, the point here is that we started looking at the threat, and obviously you should trigger on the threat. As Mike Tyson said, the guy's face can't hurt me. I'm always watching his hands. But understanding the people behind the threat is more difficult, and we shouldn't investigate every time, for example, that we see a misspelling or every time that we see an IP from a certain location. But by documenting this and having this information available, it gives us a quicker resolution to understand who these people are, what they're likely to do next, where we should look, and ultimately how we advise our customers to remediate. And this is really what that turns to look like. So, Gareth, if you want to use the example that you gave here to how this kind of move from the threat into the actor and campaign, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so like, for example, if we take something like ransomware, for example, something that we see overall affects us in the same kind of fashion overall, but we see many different heads to this. And in Alert Logic, we've split up many different actors through this, and also combined their similar tactics and techniques as well, and even found new ones by just having detection for those generic techniques as well. So all those campaigns, maybe the campaign might be specifying specifically for a financial industry, or maybe the health org, but we can be prepared by just the generic tactics and techniques as well as the more specific ones for specific actors as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can really see how this stems off. If we're looking at just that ransomware threat, we then start to see the different actors that are using part of that threat, start to separate them out, and then even further again, separate out those campaigns, as you said. So really adds further depth, further complexity to how we track them. But the benefits for our customers are huge when we see one of these actors and we know exactly who they are and what they like to do. So it brings us to activity clusters, and we argued about this definition for a while. Gareth's data science background meant that I had to be very, very accurate here, while also trying to make sure that it was understood and accessible. But we settled on this, that the groups of connected capabilities and characteristics where due weighting is applied, and that's really important there, and that present as clusters of related malicious activity. And the weighting piece, as you see when we get towards the diamond model, not all of these indicators are created equal, and it's important that we understand that. And like we say, we don't trigger and investigate just when we see a misspelling or something that on its own is benign, but together, really, really important. And that allows us to identify and track these trends within malicious activity. Now let's look at how we do this. And there really are 4 analysis tools or methodologies that we use in order to effectively cluster activity. The first is the cyber kill chain, which I believe a lot of people on this call will likely be familiar with, bleeding into the MITRE attack and defend matrix, which then really is all brought together by the diamond model. And this, when I talk to people, is normally what people are less familiar of, but this is really crucial at pulling in the other elements that aren't just about that threat, but the people behind it. And finally, we need a way to document all this, keep track of it, and make sure that this can transcend teams and transcend shifts. So the intelligence aggregation platform is crucial for that. And now, kill chain being the simpler one, I'll take this one. So first, basically, this is the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which is the sequence of events that need to occur in order for somebody to get to that final actions and objectives. So for an entire attack to be successful, all these steps need to occur. Now, Gareth, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so on to the MITRE attack framework. This framework has been developed over a good few years now, and it's continuously growing as well. It is changing. But in general, it's a standardization of tactics and techniques. When Josh goes on to the next slide, for example, we can see that that this is basically a stretch of what we've already seen in the kill chain. So we can start from the reconnaissance on the left-hand side, and then the impact, which is effectively the action objectives. And we see everything in between. And we generally see the tactics across the top, which is the more broad states there versus more granular techniques, which can also be broken down into small sub-techniques as well. We could just generally probably have a discussion here for a long time of where these do actually specifically fall in. And there are many conversations among security analysts where that goes on for. But there is it generally just falls in between the two there. Also, in more recent years now, well, in the last year, the defend matrix was also created, and these have very much been designed to correlate with each other. So you get the MITRE attack, which is this older sibling, and you can basically use them together. If you've got some exposed services, for example, you can then harden that using the defend matrix as well.
And Gareth, how do we use this? Because obviously, we've been doing detect for 20 plus years, and this is only something that came out a year. So really, the tech stuff we kind of had locked down. But you alluded to harden there, and how does this kind of help us or help our customers when we find stuff?
Well, for example, if there's if there's so many parts of this which are just things that we've been doing whilst talking to the customers. When you're in the SOC, you're talking to the customer and you're saying, you need to lock down that account, or maybe isolate that host. All these kind of terms that we've used, we can now broaden on this and have a real standardization to what we're saying to the customers, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's often we have a lot of us, we combine our own knowledge with this as well, and it's really great to have something additional to refer back to. The security community is fantastic for sharing these kind of things, and we make use of that as everybody does to contribute towards that common goal. And now I believe this goes further than the MITRE attack framework and the kill chain. You can kind of see the evolution here, and Gareth has given me an hour-long presentation on the diamond model, so I'm going to keep him short, but I'm going to ask him to kind of explain briefly what this is and how he uses it.
So generally, if we start off on the right side, we've got the capabilities / TTPs, of the tactics, techniques, and procedures. So effectively, that's where the MITRE attack framework lives very well. And this is what somebody's using And then if we work our way down, we've got the victim. So this is quite happily just what's being exploited, and the victim to these attacks. And then the infrastructure, what they're using, so which IPs they're using, domains they're using, ASOs, and then the adversary. This is the actual this is the person behind the keyboard as such. So we might see, for example, passwords or insignia, like what Josh said earlier. And these are all kind of work off different weightings, for example. So we could say, for example, that a very small change with capability means that it has to spread out into a different cluster, versus a rather large change in victim, can still mean the same thing. This is very much where we can put our the more mathematical side of this into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this basically allows us to track those actors and the pieces. And as Gareth said, they will change these pieces, but it's very difficult, near on impossible, to change absolutely every single axes of this diamond. And so often we can find pieces within that tell us this is still the same people, or a version of the same people, or likely to be at least. And so, like adversary, I think a great example, we have ones like the sorry about that, someone's at the door. But the adversary is the crypto wallet, the address. I think that's a really great one that we see in those misspellings as well. But ultimately, think back to that threat v threat actor, the warrior versus weapon analogy. That capability TTP, that's what we're talking about, the threat, the weapon, and that's what the kill chain and the MITRE attack address. These other four axes are really the additional things that we can understand beyond the threat, about the threat actor. Again, not high fidelity indicators on their own, but really when combined together, give a great profile of these people and give us quicker time to detection and resolution, and ultimately limiting that impact that our customers might undergo.
The other side of here as well is from the attacker infrastructure. If we know that the threat actor themselves is likely to change IPs quickly, we know that it's a futile defense to just block that IP. The throwaway kind of mitigation that gets done so much in this field, and we can look at a more stronger mitigation for it to be a valid mitigation in this case.
Oh, yes. As an analyst, that was always the worst, when you call someone up with a large compromise and that's the action that they focus on. And you have to say, no, that's not the most important. In the meantime, maybe. So really happy that actually our automated response playbooks now allow some of that to be completely automated, so they can focus on the harder stuff. It is harder. Yeah. I get why they want to focus on that first, but stuff that's really going to disrupt this compromise. So moving beyond the how, then, we're now looking at pulling this all together. So a kind of example. And this is the actor that we dub Mint. We'll talk a little bit more about those ice cream flavors towards the end, but that is how we codify these actors internally. And if we add now Mint TTPs, this is for one of the campaigns that Mint had, and there is a lot on here, so please don't try and read absolutely everything. But under the attacker infrastructure, what we're looking at here are the different ASOs that they use. So where do they come from when they are doing the different stages of the kill chain? And you can see the top right, I have the legend, so blue being kill chain and orange being the attack framework. We can see that they have multiple different ASOs or multiple different IPs that are used in each and every stage of the kill chain. And Gareth, why would somebody do that? And what does that kind of tell us about this actor as well?
Well, the interesting thing here is it's their strength in attack, I guess, rather than strength in defense, is their strength of depth is key to them. They change IPs regularly. We can see that what we're seeing here. But also there's a pattern to it. The same ASOs, for example, have come up quite a few times there. But by splitting it up, for example, as a security provider blocks an IP and it starts going through the community to block it, they've got that other one available to them, and that's why that defense that I was just alluding to can sometimes be quite futile with some. Others, it can be a very strong one, and that's the kind of thing we start to learn from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
but in this case, we can see that's very spread out.
Yeah, I mean, that clearly illustrates our point. The blocking the IP isn't going to work. They're just going to use another one. Keep trying. And once they're in, they can really keep knocking on the door until they're kind of successful. So that's why detection is so important on top of prevention, because you may lock some of these down with a firewall. I doubt you get to lock them all down, and they can always create new ones as well. So, and also interestingly, these do show some geographical consistencies as well for this actor. So we do have an understanding of where the region they come from, although that doesn't mean to say that they likely are from that place, but it helps us understand who they are, or who they may be trying to present themselves as. And victim, I think victim is often the victim is probably pretty untargeted in that they're just looking for servers that they can exploit, vulnerable servers. In this case, it was a Linux system because the capabilities they have had to match to Linux. But this low-hanging fruit approach is very common, indiscriminate nature, because monetization is normally the main motivation for compromises. And if you've got a server, if you're an organization, they can normally monetize it in some way, whether it's from a ransomware payment, a crypto mining, just using your kind of electricity, which is what Mint tend to use. Actually, we've never seen them get further than that, hopefully because we're so good at stopping them, or indeed to sell off the data that they collect. And the other piece then is the tactics techniques. So, Gareth, could you talk a bit here about how, look, we've now got the attack framework included in here as well?
So the big part here, for example, like if the big part from them within Mint was that we could see multiple re-compromises occurring. So if you can tell the customer, you need to look at your cron jobs, it can have a massive, massive part to this. Getting rid of that persistence, or maybe as things change, we're seeing them pull down tools, for example. So maybe blocking outbound traffic to ASOs that you wouldn't expect to be using is an excellent way of defending this as well. There's so many different parts that we can defend, different parts of the kill chain, like what you can see where it's been highlighted here.
And those T1105 and so on numbers will correspond to defend matrix as well, so people can Google that if they like to. I think the point you made is really good there, that it's that entire sequence of the kill chain, not just one piece. And like cron jobs, for example, that's a really difficult thing for us to detect upon for all our customers, because those are scheduled tasks essentially that happen frequently, that are used legitimately all the time. So if we detect on just the kind of threat piece, we might let you know, oh, here's a symptom of the compromise, but we're not identifying the whole thing. If they've got a cron job, a persistence mechanism, they'll pop up again tomorrow. And really, we haven't done our job as thoroughly as we needed to as defenders. So it's about knowing they like to embed themselves in scheduled tasks and cron jobs, telling the customer that, and then asking them to review, what's right for you at this, and we can help you certainly. But by using our fine territory monitoring tool to show you which ones were modified. But ultimately, this is something that the customer needs to check themselves and review, because we can't always tell 100% what is malicious in those kind of softer stages of a compromise, so to speak. And the final piece then is this organizing the aggregation platform, so making sure that we have everything together, collected, and this really bridges the gap. So SOC analysts can add to this, threat researchers can add to this as well, and they'll often do that by pulling down scripts and deconstructing them so that they can understand more about this threat and feed more indicators back and forth between the teams. And also, if Gareth's hit by a bus tomorrow, heaven forbid, his good work will live on, and Alert Logic can continue to make use of this, as well as all the other analysts and researchers that contribute towards this. But you're getting the stick today because you're the figurehead, I'm afraid. So now looking at an example of Mint, these are the different campaigns that we've seen them embark on, and they tend to focus their campaigns around an exploit that allows for remote code execution, that gives them that initial access to a machine to then go and carry on doing the rest of the things they need to do to get to their objective, which, as we said, is normally crypto mining. So I'm not going to list them here, but just to show you how they've evolved for the years and how we've been able to track them for a good number of years now. And I've ended it at 2021, although they have been pretty busy in 2022. Gareth had just come off a call where there'd been some activity to these guys, or something related to at least. So now we want to focus on the Log4j, which was the end of 2021, and this example here. And I want to go through exactly how the attack works. I want to just draw your attention to the kill chain at the top. So we have the delivery and exploit phase that is in phase one. So they send an exploit to the website. And remember, this was a 0 day at the time. There was massive hit there. Everybody knows about this one, I'm sure. But when a 0 day hits, at best, you might get a proof of concept for one exact attack string. If you detect just on that, they're going to make those derivatives. They're going to expand beyond that. And so it's very difficult to detect a 0 day exploit, if not nigh on impossible in some scenarios. But when they get to the next stages, and they do that remote code execution, they start to get the victim server to reach out to those attacker servers, those ASOs, those adversary infrastructure that we showed we had all the documentation on. So we're watching those, and we also know the kind of scripts they like to pull down and actions they take. So we ought to identify compromise through that, even if it wasn't at the earliest stage of the kill chain, as we would have potentially liked. Furthermore, when we get to command and control phase, there's more things they're going to do that we can detect upon. So it allows us as analysts and as threat hunters to work backwards down that kill chain and ultimately get early warning of these kinds of zero-day exploits and attacks. And I think, Gareth, was the script quite helpful in pointing out where this was what this was likely to be?
Yes. I see with this one, there was a lot of media hype that went with it and everything as well. But in other ones, for example, we saw literally the way that they've named their scripts has kind of given it away over time. So we've been able to work backwards from what we're seeing, literally of something that a file that had been created only half an hour before. So it was something that was quite fantastic from the SOC side of things. But for example, like in the log for JSON side of things, we ended up finding this activity, but also then being able to specify maybe on a specific stack that they were targeting, and going into that more granularity side of things as well. It gives you the ability to give the customer better feedback and more specific targeting of where they might be vulnerable. And in this very early days where everything's going on.
Yeah, and the outcome for that is fantastic. Early warning of this kind of compromise. As we know the group, we were really good at telling them how to mediate the compromise. And also then, because we caught this quite early, some of Gareth's colleagues were able to focus on looking for machines that weren't yet targeted, that were likely vulnerable to Log4j. So people were made aware that this was going around, that we'd seen this kind of campaign begin before they were even targeted. So never having to undergo that kind of compromise and that all hands on deck scenario. And quickly, I just want to pull up a bit of the kind of mitigation techniques that you could have. We have block and detect included on top of these. But really the point here is that this is something that's so brand new that you're unlikely to be able to block every single stage of this. And as we mentioned, they have many different ASOs they can use. They have different techniques they can use. Once they're on there, they'll keep trying until they're successful, or indeed they might even try and kill something like an EDR, which is very doable also. So detection is super important, and threat hunting detection beneath this to kind of underpin the defense in depth strategy. And we're coming up towards the end of the time, but I think we've got two really interesting examples that we want to pull up. And Gav, I'll let you go straight away to this one. This was a development we saw in Mint. So what is this, and why is this significant?
Yeah, so this was back in, I think it was May 2020, if I remember correctly. We saw the main binary expand in size. And the main thing that we observed whilst going through it was Shakespeare's Hamlet that was just in there. It was just the bottom. We have various theories of why that was there. Primarily based on maybe making the whole size of the file bigger, so a percentage of malicious content was going to be lower. So anything that was based on like any form of threshold could then be mitigated from that. Or it could be just a case of it's a lot of words and could be used as a brute force, for example. So there could be various reasons for why that was there, but it did mean that it had its hallmark to it, and we could trace this along the times, and also how much things changed. We didn't see this before, but now we all of a sudden see it. And since we've also seen it go away, which is a bit of a disappointment, really. It's always fun seeing Hamlet.
Has it gone away now? That's a shame.
Yeah, the King of Denmark.
I mean, it's constant cat and mouse, right? And I think that either this is a hidden word list that they can use for something else, or those EDR tools, those AV tools that block on percentage likely malicious. Now there's a whole load of benign text that can't possibly be malicious. Shakespeare, when he wrote this, certainly didn't intend it to exploit any machines. So it is benign, and that's why they used the largest play of Shakespeare there to get that score down, essentially. And the other piece then is on the attacker infrastructure side. These are all the IP addresses that we were monitoring, or a big chunk of them for this group. And as you can see towards the right-hand side of this, we see a significant kind of drop-off for a period. And Gareth, what can that tell us about an actor?
The main thing is we're seeing a difference. We're seeing a change. There's something that's relatively normal, even though it's chaotic. There's patterns to that chaos. And now we're seeing it change. We're seeing it get bit more random, and therefore that kind of says that things are changing. It could just be that they're targeting new infrastructure, they're changing IPs maybe, or that they're adding new compromises. And if they're adding new exploits in there, that means that we're going to be needing to look at new things.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of those kind of early warnings that let us know they might be changing their tactics and having a kind of reimagination of themselves, so that we need to look a bit elsewhere and kind of update our diamond model on this, essentially. So quickly want to cover off. So Gareth, as you use this, what are the kind of benefits for activity clustering for yourself and the analyst in Alert Logic? So
a large part of it is being able to see things before they actually are a problem. So early warning signs. And also when we do see actually hit customers, we know where to look next and where to we're to tell the customer to go and look where we can't look. So maybe it's off a host that we don't cover, for example.
And where we can look, we look straight there and go straight into it. So quicker time to mean time to detection, which ultimately means quicker mean time to respond for our customers, which means less impact from a compromise, which ultimately is what we're all about here at Logic. So I think that kind of covers off there and allows us to really use better detection, better remediation advice, and quicker response, and more comprehensive response as well. I think we touched on that earlier. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Gareth, for taking us through activity clustering.
All right, excellent presentation. Thank you so much to our expert presenters from Alert Logic. I learned a lot about this. This is a fascinating topic. I know, better security, better efficiency around security, better alerting and vulnerability management can help so many companies out there to be more secure. This is one of our short format webinars here. We're trying to keep this short and quick and get you back to work and taking actionable steps to better improve your security. So we're taking questions electronically, and of course we do welcome your questions electronically. Those will go over to the Alert Logic experts to get back to you on. So if you have a question, now's the time to get it in. Don't forget, we do have our best question prize still here in play for a $50 Amazon gift card if you have a question about the Alert Logic solution. I do want to now announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. Let's see, this is going out to Wendy Quach from Texas. Congratulations to Wendy Quach from the great state of Texas. We'll reach out to deliver your gift card, and we'll be getting back to our best question prize winner as well via email. So thank you to everyone who joined us on the webinar today. For additional information on the Alert Logic solution, check out the Handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a solution overview on the Alert Logic MDR solution. And of course, visit the Alert Logic website for additional information. I hope that you have a great day, and we'll see you next time on another Actual Tech Media event. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.